Welcome to this video, and in this video I'm going to be looking at the brand new Dji O4 Air unit. If you're not familiar with these kind of boards, when you build your own scratch built drone like this, essentially if you combine your air unit, this is the O3 air unit in the back, with a flight controller, a set of speed controllers, a motor and a frame, you've essentially got yourself a complete FPV drone. So it's a very easy way to make your scratch build FPV drone compatible with DJI controllers and goggles. So what I'm going to be doing in this video is compare how the O4 Air unit's video quality compares against the Dji Neos. To do that, I'm going to mount this on the back of this, and then we'll have a look at the footage compared against each other. So first of all, let's find a way to mount this on this. Okay, so here we go. This is the Dji Neo with an O4 Air unit strapped to the back of it in a very crude way, complete with a 1S LiPo power supply. So why am I comparing these two against each other? Well, they've got a lot of similarities in the sense that they've both got a 1/2-inch sensor camera, they've both got onboard storage of about 24 gigabytes, they've both got O4 transmission, and they've both got the ability to stabilize in rock steady and gyroflow. So very similar. There's also a few differences in that the Air unit allows you to record in 60 frames per second 4K as opposed to 30 frames per second on the Neo. You've got a slightly higher bitrate on the Air unit, and also you've got some additional modes like race mode on the Air unit. So the following is a compilation of footage that I've put together in various lighting conditions with this kind of setup. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the labels off for the first 30 seconds, so you won't know which one's which. See if you can guess which one's the O4 Air unit, which one's the Neo, which one you prefer, and after that I'm going to put the labels on, show you a bit more footage, and then discuss what my feelings about the O4 Air unit is and how it compares against the Neo. So let's get going. Here's the footage. Okay, so how did you find that? Did you manage to guess which one was which? You can leave your comment below if you want to brag about getting it right, or if you've got some interesting thoughts about it. Me personally, I felt there was definitely a difference between the two bits of footage, and I was quite surprised that in most cases the Neo actually seemed to be better, which really did surprise me because I'm a major proponent of the Neo, but I'll be the first person to admit that one thing that it does lack on is image quality, and it did get slated for that at its release. It still does now. So I'm quite surprised that the O4 Air unit, the light version, didn't really get any slack for it when it's certainly no better than the Neo. Okay, so have a look at this footage here. It's shooting into the sun, which is tricky for a little drone like this and a little camera where you're not really going to get the best results anyway. But with the O4 Air unit, there seems to be a lot more of the highlights blown out and destroying the image and causing breakdown, compared to the Neo, which has a little bit more usable parts of the image and just seems to look a little bit nicer. It's the same exposure settings, so if you look at the shadows, it's not like I've up the exposure on the O4 Air unit. It just seems to be like there's a little bit less dynamic range with the O4 Air unit in this particular case. This kind of effect seems to be worse in some situations than others, but certainly in a few cases where I'm shooting into the sun or into very highlighted areas, even areas which are reflected of the sun, so you've got highly reflective surfaces like white buildings and things like that, just seem to be blown out and causing blurriness, and it just looks horrible. In addition, you've also got a lot more lens flare with the O4 Air unit than the Neo, and that's visible in these particular frames which I can show you right now. All of that leaves me to think that perhaps there's a difference in the glass that's in front of the camera, or the kind of physical setup as opposed to software, because I'm pretty sure it's the same sensor they're using, but yeah, somehow the lens flare just seems to be a lot worse for the O4 Air unit. Another difference is that the shadows appear to be a little bit more contrasty with the O4 Air unit. That's not necessarily a bad thing, some of you might like it, but there's definitely a difference between the two types of footage. Another difference between these two is that the Neo does allow you to record in HDR, whereas the O4 Air unit does not. I've done a whole video about the Neo's HDR capabilities, which I'll leave a link to in the description below or up here somewhere. But yeah, at the moment, that's not possible on the O4 Air unit. Now, before you ask, I did test for like as well between the Neo and the O4 Air unit, turning off HDR to ensure that those blown out highlights and lens flare aren't down to HDR processing. But yeah, that's one bummer if that's something you're after. Another difference that's more of a physical aspect but worth mentioning is that when you go in manual mode with the Neo, there is a level of stabilization, even in manual mode, in the tilt axis. So if you watch it, if you do a sudden movement like this, even in manual mode, there'll be some camera movement to compensate for that. Obviously, you won't get that with the O4 Air unit, which is completely fixed in place. So when you're stabilizing, especially on windy days, your results might differ between a drone like the Neo compared to a self-built drone with the O4 Air unit. Okay, so on picture quality alone, I would say the Neo is actually better than the O4 Air unit, which I did not expect. Again, this is the light version. There's no doubt that the Pro version would be much, much better than the Neo. That's why I didn't test it, because it'll be quite a clear-cut result. But yeah, picture quality, I'd say the Neo has it on this one. Let me know if you feel the same based on the footage you've seen. That's not to say that the O4 Air unit is bad. There are a lot of features that the O4 Air unit has which the Neo does not. So for example, 60 frames per second 4K you can't do with the Neo. So if you're doing action shots and sports and those kind of things, you'll have the ability to do a bit of slow-mo on that, which is nice. The race mode, which supports race band channels, is lovely. And also the ability to have a low latency flying with the O4 Air unit is also nice if you're into that kind of flying. Okay, so rounding the whole thing up, would I recommend the O4 Air unit? Putting aside the whole video quality thing, which is, I mean, it's not as bad as it probably sounds, it's just not any better than the Neo, and the Neo has been slated for its video quality. I personally think it's actually not that bad. So the O4 Air unit, for all intents and purposes, it has okay video quality. Putting that aside for a second, £99 for all you're getting there, a camera, video transmitter, radio receiver, onboard storage, antenna, all of that, which you can slot into your self-build, is just exceptional value for money. And I put this video together because I felt that a lot of my viewers are probably new DJI Neo users, maybe new to drones altogether, or new to DJI altogether. And you might have invested in a set of goggles 3, you might have invested in a set of remote controller 3 for the FPV flying, or the set of goggles N3, which are quite good value for money. You might want to move into other drones. Well, if you're doing that, then this board would be a great solution to build your own drone, because you can slot this into a frame with a speed controller set and a flight controller and a few motors and a few props, and you've got yourself a drone, which is fantastic. Okay, just a quick disclaimer at the end of this video. This setup is not practical. It's not an action camera. It's been put together so we can compare footage between the O4 Air unit and the Neo at the same time. As an action camera, it's useless because, for starters, you would need another set of goggles 3 and another remote controller 3 just to activate this into recording. And unless you want to spend £500 on a glorified record button, that's quite silly, so it doesn't serve any purpose in that sense. Also, this is a 1S LiPo on the back. That's just about enough to run the O4 Air unit on its own, but if you're in a tiny whoop kind of setup and you're running your entire setup on 1S, voltage lag will drag that voltage below 3.7, which is the minimum requirement of the O4 Air unit, and then it won't work anymore. So unless you've got a step-up converter on your voltage, you can't run this on 1S in a practical sense. Okay, so that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it and hope you found it useful. I'm currently putting together lots of content on the Neo, the Air 3S, the O4 Air unit, and also the new DJI Flip. So if you want to see content on those, stay tuned. Other than that, happy flying, stay safe, and I'll see you very soon. Bye bye.